probably a little later, maybe 1979.
Okay. And you, because I
78,
think,
79.
if I recall right, you stayed with Brian Ansell for a while there? So the Perrys were sculpting in something like milliput at the time, weren't they?
That's what they were sculpting.
And that's what most people were sculpting in, wasn't it?
In England, yeah. Over here they were using a variety of things. I mean, I'm trying to remember the names of some of these old companies. Dragon Forge, was it? No.
I thought they were later.
No. Anyway, there were some people using lost wax, which is essentially you sculpt a figure in wax, and then you coat it with ceramic, and then you burn the wax out, and then you cast metal into it to get a metal master, and then you can just go about the procedure the way you normally would. There were people who were doing what minifigs did, which was carving and solder. What you do is take your original, which you build up with just blobs of solder, like you buy, very soft lead solder, and then you'd carve it down from there. And if you missed it or messed up, you just put another blob of solder on it and carve that away.
And that's what they were doing at Der Kriegspieler, right?
No.
No?
Well, not by the time I caught up
Okay.
with them. They may have done that originally, but that's the way minifigs work. At Der Kriegspieler, they had their basic metal figure, which they'd carve pieces of stuff off of when they wanted to change it, and they would use AB plumber's putty, which you can still buy. It is really nice for doing conversions because it's very soft. It's epoxy and it stays where you put it. It doesn't snap back like the green epoxy does, but it's crumbly. And the fact that it's so soft makes it a little difficult to work. It's like a very soft version of milliput, except not as fine grained. Milliput is quite fine grained, and only really the crumbling on milliput is only really a problem when you try and when you try and do things that are stretched, or you try and do things that are really fine. So milliput, it's hard to do nice effects in hair or clothing with milliput because of that. Because when you try and stretch it, it'll just won't crack. Whereas the green epoxy, you can do whatever you want with it; it won't crack.
And with the milliput, I think you said chainmail's particularly difficult.
Chainmail was what they asked me about, because I wasn't particularly good at sculpting at that time, except for the fact that I had this technique for doing chainmail. There was nothing special about my early sculpts. They looked like the Kriegspieler things I was supposed to match.
When you went over there, did you bring like a bucket of green epoxy with you?
No, I just brought a little bit, just to show them. After I'd been there the first time, when I'd come back here, because they couldn't get it very easily in England, they'd tell me to bring bars and bars of it over. Yeah. But they were still using it only for specific things because it was so precious. It was kind of funny to me because I'd go down to the hardware store and buy a stick of this stuff for $1.95, and they're treating it like it's the Holy Grail, taking just a little tiny bit off and mixing it together.
So they'd sort of use it for the outer skin of things.
Whenever they had to put some really fine details on something. Or they wanted to do hair, or they wanted to do chainmail, or something like that.
Okay.
And it was probably, if you're going to take that much trouble, it was probably a good idea, because the milliput, one of its advantages is it's very strong, whereas the green epoxy, even when it gets warm particularly, will warp or move. So if you don't have a particularly energetic or capable mold maker, the green epoxy could get twisted around in the mold.
Which
much more so than milliput. Yeah.
All right. I'm sure you saw like Tony Ackland
over
there.
Tony Ackland.
Was he sculpting any at the time, or had he gone?
He had done some, but he was mainly doing illustrations. They were doing. I almost never, unless somebody gives me a piece of artwork to work off of that somebody else has drawn that they want to figure me in, which happens a lot of the time with Dark Sword. I never do preliminary sketches or anything for something I'm going to make. When I'm looking through books of art, or nowadays online, and I see an idea that I like the curve of a helmet or a particular pose, something about it that I like, I'll make like a little sketch of that part, like somebody's knee or something, and I'll refer back to that when I want something, but I never do a sketch of a figure before I make it. It would take too much time.
Gotcha.
You increase the amount of time it took you to get a sculpt done by 50% at least. But at Games Workshop or Citadel, they had Tony would do the drawings, and they'd hand them to the twins, and the twins would make a figure out of them a lot of the time. I don't know if they did that all the time.
Home too, didn't they?
And they had John Blanche too was doing artwork for them.
Mostly paintings and things.
Right,
wasn't
but he
it?
was doing design work for figures too.
Nice. Was there anybody else doing design work that you know of?
Those are the only two I remember.
Did you guys at Partha ever try that?
Not really. We never had anybody who could draw that well, except who wasn't also a sculptor. I mean, Dennis Mize could draw really well, but he's a sculptor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he might have done preliminary sketches for his figures. I don't know.
Yeah,
I can draw reasonably well, but you know, I don't have. I'm not practiced at it. I never took it seriously. Like I said, all I do is make notes.
Yeah. Now, you did draw the artwork that went on the original Rao Partha packaging, right? The white box?
That was pretty horrible.
It's not that bad.
Well, my only excuse is I was about 14 years old at the time, or 15 years old. So, yeah.
Later on, when they did the first blister backers, there was the white and black card, and then there was like a red and yellow, and it had artwork around the edges that was similar in style to the black and white. Was that
too,
you?
Yeah.
Cool. Good to know.
I also came up with the idea of putting a stripe on it so that it linked with the stripes in the next one. So if you lined them all up on a rack, they'd have
Oh, they
this
fit?
kind of- yeah, they all follow from one another.
Nice.
Yeah, just something.
Now with the black and white box art, does that mean that the first Rao Partha logo that you designed, that one, was basically a reversed R against a P?
Right. Yeah.